Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brady Grove, and this podcast is brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got paid contests coming to states near you. They're giving out boosts. They're giving out bonuses. They're slashing lines all day long. Hop in those player prop DFS contests. It's a real fun platform over there. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 201 of the Tap That MMA podcast, and we've got UFC Houston this weekend. Thought the old Houston Gamblers theme song would be appropriate for a gambling podcast about a fight night event in Houston. Folks, we got Cage Warriors 200, Wood vs. Warrington 2, KSW 115, Barrios vs. Garcia, and a lot of stuff happening on UFC Fight Pass. Hell, Gable Stevenson's fighting in Mexico Fight League right now on YouTube. For my picks on all that stuff and more, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Spotify. You can now find it on Apple Music or Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram, RotoBrady MMA. Folks, the last few weeks, like after the first card of the year, then my son got the flu, my wife got the flu, I got the flu. It was a hell of a month, so I didn't get to do an episode for the last fight night that happened a couple weeks ago on February 7th. I put some bets out there that I just wasn't able to do a lot of research on, and not surprisingly didn't do well. I was surprised by how well Mario Batista did. Hyped for Kyoji Horiguchi beating Amir Albazi and entering the flyweight title picture for real. I was surprised by Kuniev. More so, like I said, I can't get a read on Jailton Almeida, and now he's not even with the UFC. Alexajuk wasn't able to finish the fight. I thought Gene Matsumoto should have won that decision, but Fareed Basharat's really good at pulling those out. My boy Juicebox had a good first round against Dustin Jacoby, ended up getting finished in the second. Really, I mean, his two losses in the UFC are to Alonzo Menifield and Dustin Jacoby. No shame there for Juicebox. Donchenko wasn't able to finish Morono, but Nikolai Veretennikov knocks out Nico Price. Ketlin Souza beats Bruno Brazil. I knew that was a possibility. Javid Basharat, that was not surprising. Kong Wang against Eduardo Moore. Why she was such a heavy favorite, I don't know how we keep getting fooled into. We keep seeing the same weakness exploited, and this was 29-28 on two or three judges' scorecards. I don't know how it was 30-27 on anybody's, but I mean, that ground deficiency is going to be an issue for Kong Wang as she works her way up the flyweight rankings. Jacob Weeklax. Yes. That was one of my more confident bets of that card. Ends up getting the last second submission. Apparently would have won the decision anyway. And then Priscilla Gutierrez lost by unanimous decision. So that's what happens when you make bets and you didn't have the time to actually look in detail into how they were going to go. So one, check out my interlude episodes. I just put out an episode with Mackenzie Mac Judo Stiller. I'm putting one out on Sunday. I've got, a handful of different ones that I've put out in the recent weeks. I've got a bunch on my calendar moving forward. I can't believe I was so stupid to wait so long to get on Instagram, because it has changed those interlude episodes drastically. Come out to the Rotoballer MMA Discord on Saturday if you want to talk about what you're doing DFS wise and betting wise for UFC Fight Night Houston. Look up for my DFS value picks article that comes out through Rotoballer on Fridays. And look out for my UFL gambling content that'll come out through Rotoballer once the spring football season kicks off on March 27th. Folks, it is late on Thursday, February 19th. We got 14 fights for UFC Houston, so let's get right into it.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
First off, we got a women's flyweight matchup between Juliana Miller and Carly Judas. Juliana Miller is the plus 550 underdog. Carly Judas, the minus 800 favorite. Juliana Miller, Won the Ultimate Fighter, beat Brogan Walker in the Ultimate Fighter finale. In a not good season of the Ultimate Fighter, and I didn't think she would end up winning that finale. But she looked by far the best of that season, which was not good. She got beat thoroughly by Veronica Hardy, finished early by Luana Santos. She is coming off a unanimous decision win over Ivana Petrovic, May of 2025. She rode 8 minutes and 10 seconds of control time to that victory, and it was 29-28 on all three judges' scorecards. By the way, Ivana Petrovic is 1-3 in the UFC. Her one win, April of 2024 over Na Liang. Carly Judas, 3 years younger. She will have a 2-inch reach advantage, even though they're the same height. She lost her fight by split decision on the Contender Series to Ernesta Karikate. Then she lost a split decision to Gabriela Fernandez. Both fights she combined for 337 strikes, I think, in total over those two split decision losses. Now she's on a good track because she finished Eunice Dubin by first round knockout and then Nicolette Cagliari by third round knockout, UFC 318. She landed triple digit strikes in that fight as well, ended in the third round. So I see why in any women's flyweight fight that is starting off the prelims, you would try to opt for a plus 550 underdog. I get it. The thing is, like Gabriela Fernandez, Ernesto Caracate, they were able to land a combined 303 strikes against Carly Judas. And only two combined takedown. Both were by Gabriela Fernandez, only led to like 2 minutes and change of control time. Juliana Miller is, going to try to get Carly Judas to the ground and control her, submit her. Her ground and pound against Brogan Walker was nasty. But it's, Juliana Miller feels revitalized. I see that. But Carly Judas is more justifiably revitalized. And not only that, both of her wins came in 2025. Her most recent one came after Juliana Miller's win. Younger, better read. She's going to be better where the fight starts, standing up. So I think that you could go double chance method of victory here. Carly Judas by decision or by knockout. Carly Judas by decision is plus 225. By knockout is minus 160. I think that it might be a squeaker, but between those two, I would go with the one that's plus money, plus 225. But I think Carly Judas to win by knockout or decision. If you get, any reasonable number on that, you can put in some sort of parlay. I get it. Carly Judas minus 3.5 in this fight is minus 400.
Oh God. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Yeah, so that one makes sense. Next up, we have a featherweight matchup between Jordan Leven and Yadier Del Valle. Del Valle is the minus 400 favorite. Leavitt, the plus 300 underdog. Let's talk about the underdog, Jordan Leavitt, first. The Monkey King, winner of 2 of his last 3. Hell, winner of 4 of his last 6. Now, against Matt Sales, Trey Ogden, Victor Martinez, and Kurt Hollabaugh. 2 submissions, actually, yeah, 2 submissions, 1 knockout, 1 split decision over Trey Ogden. Like, Jordan Leavitt has never really beaten someone that good in the UFC for UFC standards. He was submitted early by Chase Hooper, submitted in round 2 by Patty Pimblett. Claudio Puello's beat him by unanimous decision. He's mostly won in the UFC. We know what he's good at. He's a good grappler. He's good at, getting people down. Hasn't had to do so at too high of a volume. He's certainly tricky on the ground. Del Valle, the Cuban. Come on, UFC stats. You know what? I'll switch over to Tapology if that's my more reliable option. The Cuban problem, 10-0 as a professional, 29 years old, has a 69-inch reach. Will be at a 2-inch reach disadvantage compared to Leavitt, and they're the same height. DeValley, 6 wins inside the distance, 2 by knockout, 4 by submission, 4 wins by decision. And honestly, I am more impressed, because I respected Del Valle before his Contender Series fight. He had beaten Michael Aswell in a unanimous decision. Michael Aswell, friend of this podcast, pretty much his entire professional career had been spent with Fury FC in some capacity, beat fighters with, good records there. Always like to see that. Wins in the Contender Series by unanimous decision, outstriking his opponent 125-59, 2 takedowns to 1. Then he fights Connor Matthews and Isaac Dilgarian, gets rear naked chokes in the first round in a row, May and November of 2025. And really, like, even though Connor Matthews has a losing record in the UFC, he's had to fight some really good fighters, or at least some, like, guys that are not pushovers. Jose Delgado. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like, I guess that's the extent of it. But Isaac Dilgarian, solid record behind him. Jordan Leavitt has certainly fought better competition. I don't know exactly what, like, the method of victory would be here. Like, Leavitt's been submitted twice, lost by decision once. You know, and DeValle's last knockout was actually October of 2022, and his one other one was in his pro debut 2019. All three of his inside the distance victories as an amateur were by submission. I would say, like, I still think that that might be in play here. I do think that he just has a much higher ceiling than Leavitt. It wouldn't shock me if one of these heavier underdogs on these early prelim fights ends up getting a win. When we've got, more seasoned veterans against people with less experience. But, like, Del Valle by submission is plus 255. Del Valle by knockout is plus 160. I don't know where that's coming from. Del Valle by submission plus 255 or by decision plus 300. Both, I think, make plenty of sense. You can hit both of those. Or you can go Del Valle, method of victory, double chance, submission, or decision. And that'll come up to a pretty good number. I don't know why Del Valle by knockout is plus 160, with how rarely that has ended up being the outcome of his fights. And in a fight like in his Contender Series fight that he, won very thoroughly, that went the distance. So I'm riding by submission or by decision there. Next up, we've got a welterweight matchup between Phil Rowe and Jean-Paul Lebosnoyani. Phil Rowe is the plus 175 underdog. Jean-Paul Lebosnoyani is the minus 205 underdog. Let's start off with Phil Rowe. So Phil Rowe, 11-6 as a professional. Has only won one of his last 4 fights. Started off hot in the UFC. Won on the Contender Series over Leon Shabazian. Lost his debut to Gabe Green, but then rattled off 3 knockouts in a row over Orion Sose, Jason Witt, and Nico Price. Now he's lost 3 of his last 4 against Neil Magny by split decision, Jake Matthews by unanimous decision, and Suk-Hyun Ko by unanimous decision. A fight where he only landed 4 strikes because Ko kept him on the ground so well. Controlled him for 13 minutes and 10 seconds of that fight. Held Rowe to 4 strikes. His only win in that stretch was June of 2025, a 3rd-round finish over Angel Lusa. Now, Jean-Paul Lebosnoyani will be at an 8-inch reach disadvantage and is 4 inches shorter. He is 9 years younger than Phil Rowe. Won on the Contender Series by first-round knockout over Jack Congdon. And he is 9-2 as a professional. 3 wins by knockout, 5 by submission, 1 by decision. Before he came on the Contender Series, he had been in LFA for quite some time. Was the LXF champion. His only other losses in his career, so he's got 2 of them, was to Spike Carlisle, November of 2019, and Jacoby Jones at LFA 158. But, before the Contender Series, he had rattled off 3, 4, 5, 6. So what's his record in LFA? His record in LFA is 7-1. He was coming off of 3 straight wins in LFA. One over Keegan Ginrich. Combined record of his opponents before the Contender Series, those last 3 fights was 18-7. That's high quality. And Phil Rowe, like I said, has lost these last 3 by decision. He's only lost in the UFC by decision. Has he ever lost any other way? Once by knockout in his pro debut, October 2014. So that's a tough one to call. Jack Congdon, was he someone particularly prone to being finished? I mean, got submitted and got knocked out. Like, those are his 2 pro losses. I don't know. Like, I do think at these odds, like Phil Rowe plus 175, I'd like it to be like, I don't know, plus 185, plus 200. Keep an eye on that one. I don't think you need to get fancy with the method of victory. Naturally, with Rowe, I think with the close decisions that he's had, the knockout victories, you'd look in that direction. I think like Labusniani, this is his fight to lose, but this is a dangerous fight for someone who has such freaky physical features, has a lot of UFC experience, has fought, high quality fighters in the UFC. Labusniani by decision is plus 275. That's maybe where I'd end up leaning. By submission is possible too, plus 250, but Phil Rowe has never been submitted. That is important. So JPL, I would say by decision plus 275. Hit it. But definitely keep an eye on Rowe. Plus 175 for this spot for Labusniani, I think is dangerous. So if you can get a little bit more out of it than plus 175, that could be a shot worth taking. Next up, we have another welterweight matchup between Ramiz Brahimaj and Punahele Soriano. This is a closely handicapped fight. Soriano, the minus 105 underdog. Brahimaj, the minus 115 favorite. So the thing about Brahimaj is against Billy Ray Goff, maybe against Mickey Gall. That's hard to believe, though. And definitely against Austin Vanderford. This guy was highly slept on, ends up getting 3 finishes in a row. Now he's won 4 of his last 5 fights after, going 3-2 to start up his UFC run with losses to Max Griffin, Court McGee, and Thimba Garimbo. And beating Mickey Gall, certainly nothing special in 2024. But the way he beat Billy Ray Goff, the way he beat Austin Vanderford with those guillotines, that is important. Soriano, winner of 3 in a row, a unanimous decision against Miguel Baeza. We'll do that. What's this soundbite again?
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to.
And dominated by Baeza. But I don't know how meaningful that is. Knocks out Uros Medic, and like I said, beat Nikolai Veretennikov by unanimous decision, who's coming off a knockout victory over Nico Price. He has been submitted by Dustin Stoltzfus, got knocked out by Roman Kopylov, lost decisions to Nick Maximoff and Brendan Allen after winning basically his first 3 fights in the UFC, counting the Contender Series over Jamie Pickett. So counting Allen, Kopylov, those are guys that have been ranked middleweights. I don't, hold a Maximoff loss too hard against him. Maximoff has been killing it consistently in Uriah Faber A1 combat. He's knocked out Dolce Lungiambula. Most of his wins in the UFC have been by knockout or by decision. In fact, that's all of them. He's lost by submission, knockout, decision. Brahimaj has been knocked out by Max Griffin. This is a tough one. So for Brahimaj, I actually want to see what the odds were for the last 3 fights. So against Mickey Gall, he was a plus 120 underdog. Against Billy Ray Goff, he was plus 310. Against Austin Vanderford, he was plus 240. Against Thimba Garimbo, he was plus 120. Against Michael Gilmore, minus 380. That guy. Court McGee, he was minus 125. Max Griffin, he was plus 125. I don't like the closely handicapped fights for Hermes Brahimaj, frankly. These last two fights where he's really made his mark, he was a sizable underdog. Um, and, you know, for Soriano, is the plan to just catch him in a guillotine? Because if you exchange with him, then you might get in some real danger. And Soriano has been submitted once in the UFC. That just happens to be how Brahimaj has won 12 of his 13 professional fights has been by submission. I think if I'm going a money line guy, I'm going the slight underdog in Soriano at minus 105. I don't think you have to pick a method of victory with either of these guys. I think especially Brahimaj just brings like a chaos factor that could throw some of that off. Soriano to win by knockout is, come on. Soriano to win by knockout is plus 325. By decision is plus 250. You could get a good number method chance, method of victory, double chance there. Soriano by decision or knockout. If you're going Brahimaj, I guess you go by submission, considering that's 12 of his 13 professional wins. You can maybe give a look to Brahimaj by decision too, plus 600, because we have seen Soriano lose close decisions in the past. That's a tough one, but like when Brahimaj is favored or is in closely handicapped fights, it gets much more dicey than when he's been a heavy underdog. And Soriano has the ability to do damage to him when they're standing up. That's where the fight's going to start. And if he doesn't put himself in a guillotine, then you've already eliminated like 50% of Brahimaj's ending the fight threat. Next up, we've got a women's bantamweight match between Nora Cornolle and Jocelyn Edwards. Let's check the UFC rankings real quick. But Jocelyn Edwards is the minus 315 favorite. Nora the plus 265 underdog. Women's bantamweight. Jocelyn Edwards is ranked 14th. Nora is ranked 12th. Nora's ranked 12th. Jocelyn Edwards is ranked 14th. Whatever. Well, that's certainly not factoring into the odds this weekend. So let's start with Nora, the sizable underdog. She won her first two fights in the UFC, and she beat Jocelyn Edwards by unanimous decision. Jocelyn Edwards took her down 5 times in that fight. Nora outstruck her 40-18. Jocelyn Edwards had almost 9 minutes of control time in that fight, but it was 30-27 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. That is surprising. She knocked out Melissa Mullins in the second round, April of 2024. That's solid. Then she loses a split decision to Jacqueline Cavalcante. Cavalcante's really good at doing that to people. She beats Haley Cowan by rear naked choke, and then she loses to Carol Rosa by unanimous decision. Got outstruck 33-27. Taken down twice. Carol Rosa had 11 minutes and 30 seconds of control time on 2 takedowns. And that's hard to do. I know you get control time in other ways. But really, so for Nora, she has a win over this opponent, 30-27 on 2 of 3 judges' scorecards, a finish of Melissa Mullins, a split decision loss to a fighter who is, Jacqueline Cavalcante, I'm a big fan of, and who is really good at winning even close decisions. And a submission over Haley Cowan that doesn't mean very much, but it is a win. And then a loss to Carol Rosa, 29-27 on 2 of 3 judges' scorecards, 30-26 on the other. And Carol Rosa, of course, has fought, all of the best people in this weight class. It just hasn't ever fought for a title. Beaten Lena Landsberg, beaten Beth Correa, Yana Santos, Pani Kianzad, Nora. She, her only 3 losses over the last, few years have been Sarah McMahon, Norma Dumont, Irene Aldana, and Eileen Perez. So really, maybe I'm being a little too hard on Nora here. Jocelyn Edwards will have a 3-inch reach advantage. She is 6 years younger. And, they did fight like 2.5 years ago. She's an inch taller than Nora, and she has a 3-inch reach advantage. She is on a 3-fight winning streak. Submission over Tamiris Vidal, a knockout of Chelsea Chandler, and a knockout of Priscilla Kuchera. She too has lost to Eileen Perez by decision. Then we hit that Nora loss by decision. Three competitive decision wins over Lucy Pudilova, Yi Jian Kim, and Ramona Pasquale back in 2022 to April of 2023. She's had a good, and she's lost to Carol Rosa too, back in February of 2021. That was 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards. Honestly, I have been flipped in reviewing this. I do not get why Nora would be such a heavy underdog here. Jocelyn was able to control that fight for a good amount of time, but she wasn't able to do anything else with it. I think Jocelyn Edwards has certainly looked a lot better over these last three fights in, her aggression, her finishing instinct, actually looking to put the fight away. But, there's not too many holes really to poke in Nora's resume in the UFC up to this point. A lot of people can lose to Jacqueline Cavalcanti by split decision. Some of the best bantamweights in the world, top 5, top 7, could lose to Jacqueline Cavalcanti by split decision as it stands right now. And she had a more competitive fight with Carol Rosa, who was born in 1994. So it's not like, Nora's incapable of fighting anybody younger than her, and that's about the same age difference. It's rare to see someone who won the first fight by unanimous decision, won all 3 rounds to 2 of the judges, be such a heavy underdog just 2.5 years later. But I mean, on that logic alone, give me Nora plus 265, hit it. And I'll even say this.
Take care of the underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Next up, we got a flyweight match between Alden Correa and Luis Garuli. That last name's a tough one. Luis is the plus 300 underdog. Alden Correa is the minus 400 favorite. So Correa, 11-3, nickname Cobra. That's sweet. 27 years old. What weight class does his fights at? Yeah, it's a flyweight. Okay. 5 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, 2 by decision for Correa. Only 3 losses in his career. 1 was by submission, 2 by decision. Hasn't lost since January of 2024 at Fury 85. He's lost in Fury, LFA, 2 by decision, and then got submitted in his first professional loss. But he has spent like his entire amateur and pro career in, high quality spots. Was the Cage Combat Flyweight Champion, was the Fury FC Amateur Flyweight Champion. Has been with Fury FC and LFA for most of his professional career leading up to this UFC fight. And, knocked out Alessandro Costa in round 3 in his UFC debut back in September of 2025. And what were the stats on that? Outstrick him 42-12, took him down 2 times, got taken down once, controlled for 3 minutes, 18 seconds of that with those 2 takedowns. And Alessandro Costa, a guy that's 3-3 in the UFC, counting the Contender Series, and his only other losses in the UFC, considering he's beaten Kevin Borjas and Jimmy Flick, the only other 2 losses were to Steve Erceg, who beat him by decision, and Amir Albazi. Now, Luis won on the Contender Series by split decision over Nick Piccini. That was a good fight. Piccini got 10 takedowns. Luis landed 105 strikes. It was a really close decision. Then he got knocked out by Ode Osborne. Then he lost a unanimous decision to Jesus Aguilar. 29-28 on 2 judges' scorecards, 30-27 on the other. So, for Correa, a guy who has won all but 2 of his 11 pro fights inside the distance, for a guy like Luis, 32 years old, is 1 loss by knockout, the other by decision. And particularly for Alden Correa, before coming into the UFC, he was riding a stretch of not counting the loss January 2024, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins in a row, counting Costa, that were all inside the distance. No contest against Paris Moran ended up being called a no contest. after he won by knockout, basically. Has a submission as recently as June 2024. What did I say about Luis? The other inside the distance loss was by knockout. Okay, so I mean, Alden being minus 400. By decision is where no one's going to be looking for this. Actually, Korea by decision is plus 135. It's the most likely method of victory here. That's kind of wild to me. Korea inside the distance is plus 160. Hit it. For a guy that is overwhelmingly won inside the distance in his career, won his UFC debut against a guy with solid experience inside the distance, and you're getting plus 160 for him to win by submission or knockout, two methods of victory that he's won almost evenly by through his pro career, has only gone the distance twice and won. I think if this fight goes the distance, I think Luis is the more likely to have won it. But that's only plus 425 for a guy that is plus 300 as an underdog. If you like Luis in this spot, if you think that one of these underdogs on these prelims is going to win, Luis by plus 300, you don't have to get fancier than that. But give me Alden Korea inside the distance plus 160. Hit it. Next up, we've got another flyweight matchup between O'Day Osborne and Ilabai Idiris. That's a tough one, too. O'Day is the plus 110 underdog. Alibi is the minus 130 favorite. Let's talk about O'Day Osborne first. So O'Day Osborne was a ranked flyweight. He has wins over Jerome Rivera. That barely matters. CJ Vergara, Zaruk Adashev, beat Charles Johnson by split decision. Okay. The other thing is, like, O'Day Osborne has fought a lot of really tough flyweights. He got knocked out by Starboy, submitted by Brian Kelleher, knocked out by Tyson Nam, submitted by Asu Almabayev, submitted by Rafael Filo, lost to Ronaldo Rodriguez by unanimous decision, has the one win over Luis since February 2023. He's won one out of his last 5. And then he fights Steve Ursig, only loses by decision August of 2025, and 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. O'Day, like, is such a roller coaster, is the issue. You can have a decent performance against Steve Ursig, and you get finished by every other solid flyweight that you face. And, like, you got to look back and say, like, his best win in the UFC is Charles Johnson, and it was a split decision. And frankly, it was probably a different version of Charles Johnson than we're talking about today. But Alibi 10-1 as a pro, coming out of Kazakhstan. That's already bad news for O'Day Osborne. 31 years old. 4 wins by knockout, 1 by submission, 4 by decision. He, of course, made it to the Ultimate Fighter finale, lost by a second-round triangle choke to Joseph Morales, but he beat Roybert Echeverria by first-round knockout, and for Kotbek Yokubov by decision on the show. This was a guy that was a champion in Niza FC in their flyweight division. And I hold Niza FC in a pretty good regard. Certainly there are fights there that are like, how much did that count? But this is a guy that consistently beat people with good records in Niza FC. I think Alibi Adiris is legit, but Joseph Morales just is also, quite legit for being 31 years old, 14-2. He's now coming off a submission victory over Matt Schnell. So I don't think that Ultimate Fighter finale loss is, something to be too ashamed of when that was his first career loss. So, I mean, what did I say? O'Day plus 110, Alibi minus 130. This is one where I thought in line with the rest of the card, that Alibi would maybe be a way heavier favorite. And if you could have gotten O'Day at like, the same as like Nora or Luis or even Phil Rowe, then maybe that's a shot worth taking because he is a roller coaster, but sometimes roller coasters go up. But in this situation, this close, Alibi minus 130 money line, I am plenty happy with that. I think like if you really had to try to pick a method of victory, O'Day over the last 5, he got finished by all the good flyweights he's fought, except for Steve Erceg of all things. I don't know if I was gonna go one way with Alibi as method of victory. I would say like, I guess by knockout. He's only won once by submission. So, I'd say Alibi by knockout, but like I think you can go Alibi inside the distance if 130 isn't spicy enough for you there. And Alibi to win inside the distance is plus 175. Not a bad number at all. I am surprised by that. But I'm not, I guess, because like, I think O'Day could give up a rear naked choke or two to maybe someone who you didn't fully expect it to come from. Like, Kelleher and, I guess that's not completely out of character for all those guys. O'Day's just a weird fighter to pick against. But so, I'm happy that you can get a Levy minus 130 at a reasonable money line price. But like inside the distance plus 175, I think is solid. Next up, we have a welterweight matchup between Chidi Njokuani and Carlos Leal. Carlos Leal is the minus 130 favorite. Chidi the plus 110 underdog. All right, so first let's talk about Chidi. This is a guy that looked different, when he made the transition in weight class. It looked to be a positive thing for him because he had lost 3 in a row, got knocked out by RoboCop, got knocked out by Mikhail Legsajuk, lost a split decision to Albert Duraev. This is after he won his first 3 fights in the UFC, counting the Contender Series, including knockouts of MAB and Dusko Todorovic. Then he gets 2 close decisions over Reese McKee and Jared Gooden, and then knocks out Elijah Zaleski dos Santos, but then he just got submitted by Jake Matthews. Chidi is another roller coaster. Like after the Elijah Zaleski fight and the Jared Gooden fight, it looked like he had really like turned a corner and that welterweight was going to be a really great home for him. And then Jake Matthews comes and submits him July 2025. And Jake Matthews up to that point, he'd beaten Francisco Prado, Phil Rowe, Darius Flowers, but like he was, I guess Jake Matthews has really mostly won, like over the last 6+ years in the UFC. His record's actually good. It's just very few like wins over high quality opponents. When he takes a step up, he tends to lose, but that just isn't who the matchups that they're giving him. Now, Carlos Leal, I have very up and down feelings about, because Carlos Leal, before he came to the UFC, this guy's 31 years old, 22-7 as a pro, 11 wins by knockout, 2 by sub, 7 by decision. 5 of his 7 losses are by decision. 3-0 in LFA, 1-0 in Bellator, 5-2 in PFL. Before he came to the UFC, he was on a great run in PFL. So he had won actually the LFA, welterweight tournament back in 2021. Then in PFL, gets a knockout over Corey Coop, a split decision over Chris Brown, beats Ray Cooper by unanimous decision, loses to Sadibou Busai by unanimous decision, and knocks out David Zawada, knocks out Delano Taylor, loses to Sadibou Busai by split decision, picks up a win in UAE and in LFA before making the transition to the UFC, fights Renat Fakhretdinov in his UFC debut, loses by unanimous decision in a fight that, let's be honest, that was a fight that Carlos Leal should have won. I don't know if it was the part of the world that the judging was taking place in, but that was one of the rare fights that I will call a robbery. Yeah, so Carlos Leal should be 2-1 in the UFC. Then, he knocks out Alex Morono, March of 2025. And then against Muslim Salikov, he was actually a pretty heavy favorite. He was minus 480 and gets knocked out in the first round. Now, we're talking Muslim Salikov. That ended a stretch of 3 straight wins from Muslim Salikov, where I think, no, he wasn't an underdog against Kenan Song. But, for a guy that is now 41 years old, getting knocked out by Muslim Salikov is not as big of a knock as it would seem. I'm still a believer in Carlos Leal. Now, like, getting knocked out by Muslim Salikov rings dangerously in this fight, and I don't know exactly what a Carlos Leal win looks like. We've had such a weird 3-fight sample size for him. And by the way, Chidi is 37 years old now. Maybe that's an advantage actually against Carlos Leal. But, I mean, he's gotten finished in 3 of his last 4 losses. I don't think you have to go method of victory for Carlos Leal. Carlos Leal at minus 130, I am happy with. But Chidi obviously is, again, another roller coaster guy. We've a split decision of Reese McKee, weird, but knocking on Elijah Zaleski, solid. And beating Jared Gooden by unanimous decision, solid stuff. And he came to the UFC in 2021, 2022 on a very good run as well. If I was going Chidi here, I would probably go by knockout. Chidi by knockout, like, plus 110 is fine, but Chidi by knockout is plus 160. Chidi by decision is plus 700. I think over the course of a 3-round fight, I think that is going to be more Leal's advantage. So you could go like Carlos Leal by decision is plus 700. Sprinkle something on Carlos Leal by decision. I don't know why it is considered such a given that Carlos Leal would finish Chidi. I think a decision for Carlos Leal is very well on the table. But if I was going Chidi, I'd go by knockout under the same logic of the analysis of what went wrong in Carlos Leal's fight with Muslim Salikov. I am going to root for Carlos Leal and believe in him one more time here. My enthusiasm will be greatly hampered if he ends up losing this one, because this is one that if you're going to make your way up and have some more meaningful fights, you got to get this one. And, who knows how many fights Chidi might actually have left, at 37 years old. But, Muslim Salikov, 41 years old. Next up, we have a middleweight matchup between Zach Reese and Michel Pereira. Zach Reese is the plus 135 underdog. Pereira, the minus 155 favorite. Let's talk about Reese first. Let's talk about Reese, the underdog, 10-2 as a professional. Had the no contest against Cedricus Dumas. That is unfortunate. God, I hate Cedricus Dumas and how his fights tend to play out. Got knocked out by Azamat Bakoev, and then got knockout slammed by Cody Brundage in his second UFC fight, December of 2023. For the most part, he has put people away, submitted Eli Orinoff on the Contender Series, knocked out Julian Marquez. How much does that mean? Didn't finish Jose Daniel Medina. Took him down 5 times, outstruck him 75-32. Beat Dusko by unanimous decision May of 2025. That was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. And then is coming off a rear naked choke victory over Jackson McVeigh, November of 2025. He actually was getting outstruck in that fight 56-32. They had about equal control time in that fight. And Jackson McVeigh then was 0-2 in the UFC after losing his debut to Bruno Ferreira. Michel Pereira will actually have a 4-inch reach disadvantage, and he's 3 inches shorter. Pereira was always kind of fool's gold, like the weight class transitions, but he won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights in a row from September of 2020 to May of 2024. Got himself in the rankings. It started off as a lot of decisions, but he ended up having 3 finishes in a row to cap that winning streak over Andre Petrosky, Mikel Alexajuk, who he submitted, and Ihor Potieria, who he got in a guillotine. His last 3 fights got finished by Anthony Hernandez in the 5th round, a fight he was getting absolutely mauled in, taken down 10 times, 152 strikes to 24. Anthony Hernandez had 15 minutes and 42 seconds of control time. Then he loses a unanimous decision to Abus Magomedov. Lost 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards, with Abus landing 1 takedown with a minute of control time. And Abus just landing a lot more shots to the head, Pereira being too fancy with his striking. And then Kyle Daukaus makes an almost 3-year hiatal return to the UFC after being the Cage Fury champion and ends up knocking out Michel Pereira in the 1st round after 7 strikes total had been thrown. Now, he's gone on to submit Gerald Meerschaert. Kyle Daukaus appears to be back in full swing. So it's been a rough losing streak for Pereira. It's been against a good level of competition, but other than like Mikel Alexajuk and Petrosky, maybe like Santiago Ponzinibbio, Nico Price and Chaos back in 2020 and 2021, the winning streak was never really that impressive for Michel Pereira. I don't trust that guy's fight IQ. I don't trust the stuff that he does when he even is trying his best to be effective. I think Zach Reese, even though he had his issues with Jackson McVeigh, I can look past the slam against Cody Brundage because Cody Brundage fights go weird. Cedric Dumas fights end up weird. Azamat Bakoev, ended up knocking out Ryan Loder and then got knocked out by Yusri Belgari last October. Right now, honestly, with the physical advantages that Zach Reese is going to have, he's just a little bit younger than Pereira. I just don't trust Pereira. I don't trust what he's going to do in there. Has Reese won? He's won, a 3-round fight against Jose Daniel Medina. But the submission threat, the knockout threat, those are both there for Zach Reese. I think that if the fight goes 3 rounds, if he gets some takedowns, if he aims, shots for the head that appear to do damage, then I think he can win this fight in all 3 methods. I just don't trust Michel Pereira, and I didn't trust him, during that whole 8-fight winning streak. I think Zach Reese has done some things, like a couple of things, like maybe just a little bit more like Dusko win was a little like that's kind of legit. He just hasn't. This is a big step for Zach Reese. It's been quite a up and down run in the UFC for him. I thought Pereira was going to be the underdog here, and if you could have gotten Pereira plus 135 or better, that's something to take a look at. But I can get Zach Reese as the underdog here. Against a fighter who I do not trust between the eyes. Give me Zach Reese money line plus 135. Hit it. If I was going to go Pereira, if I was going to go Pereira, I guess I'd just go inside the distance. And let's see what number that's at just for interest's sake. Pereira to win inside the distance is plus 110. That does not get me out of bed. So, I'm happy to go Zach Reese money line plus 135 for a fight like this that could go a lot of different ways and I have a lot of question marks about through both of their whole resumes. Pretty happy to be like decently confident a plus 135 underdog. Next up, we've got a welterweight matchup between Jacoby Smith and Josiah the Muscle Hamster Harrell. Recent guest on the Tap That MMA podcast, Josiah Harrell. Everybody knows that guy's story. Was signed to the UFC, ended up having to have brain surgery. I think it was Mora, if I remember correctly. All resolved now, and now he is back in the UFC on short notice to fight Jacoby Smith. They're both 11-0 professionals. Josiah Harrell, is the plus 260 underdog. Jacoby Smith, the minus 310 favorite. Importantly, Jacoby Smith was supposed to fight. We were supposed to get Austin Vanderford versus John Paul Lebos-Noyani. But Jacoby Smith was supposed to fight Seok-Kyung Ko. And Ko ended up getting hurt, and now it's Josiah Harrell. Harrell. Let's talk about him first. All right. I love Josiah Harrell. Great guy. I'm going to be rooting for him. 11-0, 27 years old, fighting out of Grove City, Ohio. This guy is 8-0 in Ohio Combat League, 2-0 in LFA, 10 of his 11 career wins inside the distance, 6 knockouts, 4 submissions. So he was supposed to fight Jack Della Maddalena July of 2023 after he had won in Cage Fury by knockout and then got a knockout in LFA in his LFA debut. He's the 2-time Ohio Combat League welterweight champion. As a pro, was the amateur lightweight champion and the Iron Tiger Fight Series lightweight champion back in his amateur days. Never lost as an amateur either, and all but 2 of his amateur wins were inside the distance. So let's talk about after the Maddalena fight got canceled, because then he was supposed to go, I think, to New York for another LFA show and fight Ueliton Silva. That got canceled because the commission got weird about it. Go back and listen to the interlude episode with Josiah Harrell if you want some more details on that. Then he gets a knockout over Quentin Parks Jr., Ohio Combat League 36, March of 2025. Gets a rear naked choke victory over Melvin Gillard, May of 2025 in Ohio Combat League, a fight I was physically present for in Newport, Kentucky. Beats Keegan Ginrich, a veteran of several really solid promotions who's fought some really solid fighters. Keegan Ginrich is solid, and he beat him by unanimous decision August 2nd. I think I was at that fight too for the OCL welterweight championship that he won again. And then January 16, 2026, gets a 3rd round finish of Bekmirza Dozmatov, who was 13-2. That was at LFA 224. That dude was out of Kyrgyzstan. He was 27 years old. Was 3-0 in EFC Global. And even though there was some questions maybe about that guy's resume, he had fought, in some solid promotions in his time. Fought some people with some good records and open fighting championship. You do see some good people come out of that area. So very impressive finish for Josiah Harrell at LFA 224. Now let's talk about Jacoby Smith. Jacoby Smith. Where is it? See, I'm rusty from being sick and whatnot. Jacoby Smith, 11-0 as a professional. 72-inch reach. What's Josiah's? 68-inch reach, and he will be 3 inches taller than Josiah Harrell. Coming off a finish of Nico Price, he knocked out Preston Parsons. He knocked out Christian Savoy on the Contender Series October of 2024. And for Jacoby Smith, 8 of his pro wins by knockout, only 1 submission, 2 by decision. Before he came to the UFC, he was a longtime veteran of Fury FC. Really, in Fury, didn't beat a lot of people with amazing records. 12-11, 13-9, 7-5, 4-2. I did have questions about him coming into the UFC and in the Contender Series, maybe less in the Contender Series, but Preston Parsons, that's a very winnable UFC fight. Nico Price in June of 2025, that's a very winnable fight for a young, dangerous guy like Jacoby Smith. I believe a lot in Josiah Harrell's professional experience. People might look at how many fights he's had in Ohio Combat League and see that as a knock to his credibility, but he had some really good fights in that promotion, especially against Keegan Ginrich, and make what you will of the Melvin Gillard fight. But this guy has never lost either. And 2-0 in LFA, 1-0 in Cage Fury. Never lost as an amateur and fought people with good records as an amateur too, for those 2 amateur titles that I mentioned. So for all these, and especially because this is a late replacement, Josiah Harrell, again, go back and listen to that episode or anything else that dude's done in the meantime. Josiah Harrell has been awaiting this call from the UFC for a good amount of time. Like since his health situation got worked out, he knew he just needed to collect some wins and then wait for a call from the UFC. That's exactly what happened. Josiah Harrell is and just got a win over like one of the two best opponents that he's fought as a professional, probably just like a little over a month ago. I don't think it's a disadvantage for him to be coming in late notice. I think the disadvantage was for Jacoby Smith. He thought he was going to be fighting a guy that he was expecting to fight. Josiah Harrell kind of always knew to be prepared for a call from the UFC to fight a guy that he, wasn't going to be able to prepare for too long on short notice. I think the advantage here in the circumstances is with Josiah Harrell. I'd be lying if I said part of this, like, it has to be my heart speaking. Big fan of Josiah Harrell. And I ignore stuff like feel good human stories when it comes to fights. It's great that he came back from the Moya Moya situation. It's crazy that he was supposed to fight JDM and then that got nixed and he had to fight his way back to this point. None of that contributes to why he could beat Jacoby Smith on Saturday. But I do think he can beat Jacoby Smith on Saturday. Josiah Harrell, money line, plus 260. Hit it. Jacoby Smith is minus 310. If you're going to go Jacoby Smith, I guess go inside the distance. I guess go knockout because that's the only way to make that one financially worth it for you in a fight between two 11-0 professionals, one of which is 27 years old, the other's 30. I think there's a lot going for Josiah Harrell in this fight. I'm going to be rooting for him hard. Let's go, Muscle Hamster. Next up. There's thunder and rain tonight, too, so everything's moving just a little bit slower. 4 fights left. Heavyweight, which is in a very weird spot. Gets weirder by the day. Jelton Almeida, gone. I can't remember his name anymore. The dude that got cut, even though he was... What am I missing? Here, Ted Burrow. He fought him, right? It was I can't remember this dude's name now, and it's killing me. I have to abandon everything until I remember this dude's name that got cut despite his awesome record in the UFC. Martin Bidet. Martin Bidet, who ended up, past the Contender Series in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wins, only 1 loss in the UFC. He gets cut. Jelton Almeida, he gets cut. Tom Aspinall's career might be over because of the eye injuries he sustained against Cyril Gane. And then we're waiting for some sort of weird heavyweight or catchweight mega fight at the White House. Whatever. I'm sick of all that. God, I know that there's some people out there that weigh more than 220, 230 that can fight a little bit more often. Tom Aspinall, wasted so much time waiting for John Jones. John Jones, I don't think ever really wanted to fight him. And now we're in this situation. And now I got to go back. Now I'm trying to get a little bit more familiar with the lay of the land here. Where is Cyril Gane at? Gane just came up with a no contest against Tom Aspinall. So now they probably got to figure out something else. How many interim and vacant title fights can this division have over a how many year span? Anyway, Sergey Spivak, a guy that at times I've been really high on. July of 2020. So he beats Tai Tuivasa 2 fights in to his UFC run. He lost 2 of his first 3, but those 2 were against Marcin Tybura and Walt Harris. That is a very tough first 3 fights in the UFC, and you still get the win over Tai Tuivasa like 6 years ago when that meant a lot more. Then Sergey Spivak wins 6 of 7 fights From July 2020 to February of 2023 over Carlos Felipe, Jared Vanderaa, Alexei Oleinik, get more impressive, Greg Hardy, Augusto Sakai, and Derek Lewis. The only loss in that span of time, Tom Aspinall. Would be a good soundbite.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Now he's lost 3 of his last 4, and it's gotten more and more concerning as time has gone on. So he got knocked out by Cyril Gane, dominated by Cyril Gane, 109 strikes landed by Cyril Gane, up to the point that it got finished in the 2nd round. Knocked out by Jelton Almeida in the 1st round. Lost a unanimous decision to Walter Cortez Acosta in his last fight at UFC 316, outstruck 110 to 48. He had 2 takedowns that only netted 2 minutes and 25 seconds of control time. He got stuffed on 4 of his 6 takedown attempts. And, particularly like 1, 2, 3, 4 of his 6 UFC losses have been by knockout. And they're people that are good at knocking people out. Waldo is really good at knocking people out. He's knocked out his last 3 opponents. We'll get to that 1-3 fights ago in a little bit. He took a lot of damage against Waldo. You knew that, from previous fights, Sergey, use your grappling, get Waldo to the ground, control him there. And he just wasn't able to do it. The strikes were just too disruptive for him. So I once felt really highly about Sergey's, but you thought at one point maybe that guy's not that good, and then he would win and over some really impressive names, and it was okay, now Sergey, especially not being that old, being a big polar bear as he is nicknamed, maybe this guy can make a run. But these last 3 of these last 4 fights have really. It's not just that he lost. It's that he did not look comfortable or like he was going to be competitive past the first few minutes when he started to get hit. His only loss in that stretch of time is an avenging loss over Marcin Tybura by armbar. And, Tybura does what he does. He's won 2 since then, but he did get knocked out by Ante Aliha in Daliha's UFC debut. Let's get to Daliha now. I think pretty much the same exact size as Sergey Spivak, 6'3", with a 78-inch reach. He's 5 years older than Sergey. Now, here's the thing. Daliha, before the UFC, I had great respect for what he had done. 26-7 as a professional, 35 years old. In PFL, 8-3. In KSW, 1-0. In Ryzen, 1-0. His only other loss. Oh, okay. Let's go 3. Let's go 4 back. Because 4 losses back takes us all the way back to September of 2015. So he got knocked out by Valentin Moldavsky in PFL, a fight where he was a +130 underdog. He did beat Maurice Green, Matthias Scheffel, Henan Ferreira, Shelton Graves, Matthias Scheffel again, beat Dennis Goldsov by unanimous decision, knocked out Chandler Cole, but had 2 losses in between to Bruno Capoloza by decision and by knockout. So 2 losses to the same dude in a stretch of just a few months with that PFL schedule back then. Beat Ollie Thompson in KSW. And so then we get to 4 fights, 4 losses ago before he entered the UFC. That takes us all the way back to September 2015. That was a leg injury in round 1 against Marcin Tybura, an M1 challenge for the M1 heavyweight championship. So people can make their jokes about Daliha. He's not that old. And in every other promotion he has ever fought in, he has succeeded. At PFL, KSW, and Ryzen combined, he is 10-3. With 2 of those losses coming to the same dude. So let's take it to the UFC. All right. So he knocks out Yorgan De Castro in between his PFL run. That was in FNC 22. UFC debut. I was thinking Marcin Tybura in this spot plenty. Daliha this was a pick'em fight. Give me Tybura to just do his thing, grind this fight out, win a decision. No, absolutely kicks Marcin Tybura's can across the octagon, knocks him out in the first round. You can feel the punches that D'Elia lands through your TV screen. So that was a big UFC debut win. Then he fights Waldo, all right, November of last year. Waldo, who is now, and take a look at the UFC heavyweight rankings real quick. Let's all have a laugh here. Heavyweight. So Aspinall still at the top. Then we got Gon, Volkov, Pavlovich, Blades, Waldo. And Waldo's on quite a tear. D'Elia's ranked 9th, by the way, and Spivak's ranked 7th. So Jelton's gone now. D'Elia beating Spivak could mean he fights Rizvan Kuniev, and then there's Volkov, Pavlovich, Blades, and Cyril Gane. And who knows what will be the case with John Jones? Who in the hell knows? Because all the other young heavyweights that have tried to make their way up, besides Kuniev, besides Waldo, and they still have this is the hardest part of the heavyweight division to get past, because some of these guys, despite the fact that they're tough to beat, don't fight incredibly often. There's not too many more matchups at the top of heavyweight to make. When you've got Shamil, Taliesin, those guys, not looking like they can really make it past the top 10 unless a bunch of these guys just retire at the same time. But Jelton's gone now. Walter Walker could be something. Let's see if he can keep heel hooking people. Anyway, D'Elia in that fight with Waldo. If you recall, D'Elia was teeing off against Waldo with Waldo's back to the cage. Waldo gets poked in the eye. D'Elia's still landing a bunch of hard punches. Waldo was being dumb against the cage and taking too many shots, which he's been known to do. And the fight gets, there's a timeout called. Waldo, D'Elia thinks he won the fight. A lot of people think D'Elia just got the TKO, but it was an eye poke that was kind of called late after Waldo made it really apparent he had gotten poked in the eye. Then seconds after they restart that fight, I think it wasn't too long after they restarted it, Waldo ends up knocking out D'Elia. I am not going to hold this one against D'Elia at all. First of all, we're talking again, Waldo, a highly ranked heavyweight contender. D'Elia was doing what what you'd hope he'd be doing, landing those big cans of meat against Waldo's head against the cage. Thinks he won the fight, adrenaline dump, emotional dump, come back into it. Waldo finishes him. Brutal. So here, you can see how some fights you can just see the movie of how you think they're going to end up playing out. And this is one of them where D'Elia has only been submitted twice in his career, only lost by decision once. In a long career, mostly he's been knocked out. And that's a problem here for Sergey Spivak, because Sergey Spivak, if it's a guy that hits harder than him and is more comfortable striking than him, Sergey Spivak, like he did against Derek Lewis, if you can't use your freakish features, because he knocked out Augusto Sakai and Greg Hardy, but he had to submit guys like Tai Tuivasa and Derek Lewis. It's the grappling that's his greatest advantage. He's a long dude, but so is Ante D'Elia. And, I just don't see Spivak being able to get any hip tosses, trips. I don't see him falling into an arm triangle or an arm bar, whatever it is. I think that the Waldo fight at the kind of killed that delusion or that illusion for me for Spivak. If he gets hit hard by D'Elia in the first 30 seconds, I don't know if Spivak will feel comfortable enough to get off any good takedown attempts where his best chance in this fight lies. Because he can hit D'Elia hard, but I think D'Elia is going to be more confident, more aggressive, and probably hits harder. So what did I even say the odds were of this fight? D'Elia minus 130. Give me Ante D'Elia minus 130 money line. Hit it. And if you're going method of victory here, go D'Elia by knockout That is hilariously minus 110. That's okay. Hit it.
Full call.
Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
And if I'm going Sergey Spivak, by submission is plus 550. By decision is plus 450. When's the last time? Has he won a decision? He beat Alexei Oleinik by decision. But that's a much different kind of fighter. So I don't know. I don't know if I particularly like Sergey Spivak's odds to win by decision either. But you're telling me, like, if you're going to prop on Spivak, ignore the career history for Deliha. And like Spivak by submission plus 550, probably as good as you're going to do on him. Maybe like inside the distance, Spivak is plus 270, but that honestly, I don't know if that's enough for me. I am feeling pretty good about Ante Deliha in this one. But who knows? I could end up looking real stupid on that. That happens. This is the UFC heavyweight division. Next up, we have a featherweight matchup between Dan Ige and Mel Costa. Dan Ige is the plus 182 underdog. Mel Costa, the minus 212 favorite. So Mel Costa, 25-7 as a pro, nicknamed the Dalmatian, in combat to the childhood bullies he had because of his dermatological condition. 29 years old, 8 wins by submission, 8 wins by knockout, 9 wins by decision, 2 losses by knockout, 2 losses by submission, 3 losses by decision. Incredibly consistent and balanced is Mel Costa, but he's 6-2 in the UFC. Spent some of his professional time in LFA before he came to the UFC. Like most of his losses are December 2018 and before. That's 4 of his 7 losses. Now, he did lose by unanimous decision to Italo Gomez May 2022 in LFA. He's had some wins in LFA too, so that doesn't concern me. But like, makes his UFC debut against Thiago Moises, gets submitted, then beats Austin Lingo by unanimous decision, then fights Steve Garcia, the same Steve Garcia who right now is on a 7 fight winning streak in the UFC, all but one of which ended by knockout. So a loss in your, what did I say it was? A loss in your 3rd UFC fight. 3 fights in the UFC, and 2 of them are against Thiago Moises and Steve Garcia. And so I don't blame him at all for those. But then he finishes Shilan Nurden-Becky. He submits Andre Fili. And by the way, this guy fought 4 times in 2025. Beats Christian Rodriguez by unanimous decision. Beats Juliana Rosa by unanimous decision. Then knocks out Morgan Charrier round 1 December of last year. So even going back like 2025, he was a slight favorite against Fili. He was a slight underdog against Rodriguez, slight favorite against Rosa, and a slight favorite against Morgan Charrier. This is as favorite as we've seen him since he fought Shilan. He was even more of a favorite now against Dan Ige. So now Dan Ige, 19-10, 34 years old. And where's Mel? Oh, Mel is I think 3 inches taller and will have and they actually have the same reach. But Danny Ige, everybody knows that this guy is a legendary badass.
Full call.
Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
So let's just go a handful of fights back, I guess, for Danny Ige. So like, no, hell, let's just go back to when 2020 began, when this decade began. So it beats Mirsad Bektic by split decision, Edson Barboza by split decision, in a fight that, I thought Edson won, but very competitive. Loses to Calvin Kattar by unanimous decision, knocks out Gavin Tucker, loses 3 straight decisions to the Korean Zombie, Josh Emmett, and Movsar Evloev. No shame in any of those losses. Knocks out Damon Jackson, beats Nate Landwehr by unanimous decision, loses to Bryce Mitchell by unanimous decision, knocks out Andre Fili, loses to Diego Lopez by unanimous decision in the famous 8 hours notice fight replacement that he stepped in for and was very competitive in. Loses to Lerone Murphy by unanimous decision, knocks out Sean Woodson, and then loses to Patricio Pitbull. Finally, a win for Pitbull in the UFC and for the Bellator guys. Loses to him by decision. So Ige, in his career, has never been finished. And that's incredible considering the names of people I just listed that he has fought. But in total, 11-9 in the UFC, 5 wins by submission, 7 by decision, and 7 wins by knockout. The question is this within the range of Dan Ige? He was an underdog against Sean Woodson. He was favored against Andre Fili. Very slight favorite against Damon Jackson. Minus 275 against Nate Landwehr. Against Diego Lopez, did they even have time to put out odds? He was plus 210. Against Lerone Murphy, he was plus 275. Against Pitbull, he was actually minus 220, the favorite. So, like, obviously, the thoughts here, like, Dan Ige's never been finished. Mel Costa can beat you in any which way. If you're going Mel Costa at minus 200, go Mel Costa by decision. Let's see what the number on that is. Mel Costa by decision is minus 150. I think that's very fair. I don't hate that at all. With Dan Ige, all right, so like his last submission win is 2019 against Danny Henry. And then you'd have to go back to his Contender Series appearance 2017 to find the more recent one. 3 submissions ago for him was against a 3-2 opponent, Legacy FC, in 2016. I know he's won by submission 7 times. I just don't really think it's as much on the table for this particular fight. Dan Ige in some of these closer decisions. So he loses to Pitbull by unanimous decision. That was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Loses to Lerone Murphy by unanimous decision, 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Diego Lopez, 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. And Bryce Mitchell, 29-28 on 2 of 3 judges' scorecards. Of all people, Bryce Mitchell's the one that got a 30-27. Now, obviously, Movzar did. Movzar even got a 30-26. Josh Emmett, 30-27, 2 29-28s. Korean Zombie, 49-46, 49-46, 48-47. Dan Ige, even when he loses decisions to some of the best featherweights in the game over the last handful of years, they're competitive decisions. And these are people that right now we hold in higher regard than Mel Costa. So I think that a knockout for Ige is certainly on the table. But, you know, that it's not like that has happened too recently to Mel Costa. He's been in some close decisions himself, some competitive ones, like against Christian Rodriguez. That was 29-28 on all 3 judges' score. He got taken down 6 times in that fight. You know, if Dan Ige can make this really competitive, I think Mel Costa has a fuller set of tools. He's younger. He has a great wind of momentum underneath him. He's now beaten, you know, a handful of, you know, quality names. Mel Costa by decision is the single most likely way that this fight ends up going. But Dan Ige certainly can get a finish here. But I think even more likely, I think that this could turn into a really close decision where Dan Ige lands some of the bigger shots, maybe has Costa hurt, and Costa just fights more of a mixed martial arts fight, and we end up with whatever the judges' scorecards are. So, you know, Dan Ige plus 182 is not horrible at all. Dan Ige by decision is plus 500. You want to take a chance on something in this fight? Do that. Hit it. And I'm going to go even crazier. There's some props here. Dan Ige over 55.5 strikes is plus 110. I would take that. Mel Costa under 70.5 strikes. That's minus 140. I would look at that. Most takedowns landed, Costa minus 170. Most significant strikes landed. Ige is plus 195 for most significant strikes landed. I would take a look at that. But Ige by split or majority decision is plus 1,200. So I think there's plenty in this fight that you can play around with and have something on each dude, including those statistic props, and end up having a fun time watching this and end up winning. Ooh, boy. 2 fights remaining. For some reason, Mel Costa Dan Ige isn't the co-main event. The co-main event is Jeff Neal versus Eros Medic. Jeff Neal is the minus 210 favorite. Medic the plus 180 underdog. Let's talk about Medic first. I'm less inspired by Eros Medic here. So he's won 3 of his last 4. He's won 5 of his last 7. His only loss in the UFC are to Jalen Turner, Maitbek Orobai, and Punahele Soriano. He was finished in all 3 of those fights, 2 submissions. Most recently knocked out by Soriano. So here are the wins that he's had since May of 2022. Knocked out Omar Morales, knocked out Matthew Semelsberger, knocked out Tim Means, knocked out Gilbert Urbina, and most recently, November of 2025, knocked out Muslim Salikov. Okay. A lot of knockouts. In fact, the last 3 were all in the first round. The Morales knockout was round 2. The Smellsberger knockout was round 3. They were each rocked in that fight. They were each rocked in the Gilbert Urbina fight. Urbina got a knockdown. And I, at this point, do not hold Gilbert Urbina in very high regard at all as a 7-5 pro. The Fighting Urbina brothers just can't catch a break. Now, Jeff Neal, a few years older, he will have a 4-inch reach advantage, even though he is like 2 inches shorter. Now, this guy's won 3 of his last 6 fights, but I mean, go back to January 2019. This guy's had to fight some of the best welterweights in the world. Beat Bilal Muhammad by unanimous decision. That guy went on to be the champion. Knocked out Nico Price, knocked out Mike Perry. And this is where we see the losses that Jeff Neal has taken have been to really high quality fighters, smart, experienced, talented, dangerous fighters in a pretty wide variance. Jeff Neal's down to fight everybody that they might put in front of him. So he loses by decision to Wonder Boy, decision to Neil Magny. That one was 30-27 on only one scorecard, 29-28 on the others. Wins a split decision against Santiago Ponzinibbio. Knocks out Vicente Luque, landing 121 strikes and 2 knockdowns en route to the round 3 finish. Gets submitted in round 3 against Shavkat Rakhmonov. Loses a split decision to Ian Machado Gary, February of 2024 at UFC 298. Knocks out Rafael Dos Anjos at UFC 308, and then gets knocked out by Carlos Paredes, UFC 319. So he's fought on a pay-per-view card 4 out of his last 5 fights, and 4 in a row. Pay-per-view that doesn't exist anymore. And it's weird because even though his last 3 wins, his only 3 wins since December of 2019 when he beat Mike Perry, are against Santiago, Luque, and RDA, elder statesmen, where this was kind of set up for Neal to get a competitive win so that they can kind of keep putting him in these spots. And he was like a test, he was a measuring stick for prospects for, a bit there. Shavkat 19-0. We haven't seen him since December of 2024, and apparently we might not see him for quite a bit longer. But Shavkat, Ian Gary, and Carlos Paredes, to 3 of the, the fastest rising prospects, especially at the time that he fought them each. And only was only 1 judge away from beating Ian Gary. This is not like Eros Medic can knock out Muslim Salikov, Gilbert Urbina, Tim Means, Matthew Smellsberger, Omar Morales. Jeff Neal is a different test. Jeff Neal has a very good reach for his height for this division. He has much greater experience against very high quality welterweights. And so to Jeff Neal, this has got to feel like a breath of fresh air again. Now you can win 2 of 3 fights if you collect this one. Most of his wins have been by knockout. Actually has 1 rear naked choke. There have been a couple decisions in there. Medic, like I said, all finishes inside the distance for all losses in the UFC inside the distance. And Jeff Neal's minus 210. One, if you're going Euros Medic plus 180, I would say go ahead and go Euros Medic by knockout plus 250. Because Jeff Neal has been, finished Carlos Paredes knocked him out with a spinning back elbow, which is very popular in the year 2025. But there just wasn't otherwise a lot of people that could knock him out that he fought. My concern is against Luque and Ponzinibbio is, he still took a good amount of shots. I like Jeff Neal here. Neal by knockout is minus 140. Neal by decision is plus 500. If you're going Medic by knockout or by decision is plus 1,000. But Neal, method of victory double chance by knockout or decision, I think makes a lot of sense. If I had to pick one, I'd say Neal by knockout because Euros Medic is going to be looking to knock him out, and I think Neal is going to be better at finding that knockout. I don't think this is necessarily a fight that lends itself to going 3 rounds unless, these guys have a pretty long feeling out process. If it goes to decision, I could definitely see it being like a split decision win for Jeff Neal. He tends to be a part of those a good amount. That could be worth a flyer. And if all it would take is Euros Medic landing a really good shot in one of the rounds, and that could end up stealing one of the rounds, maybe one round's close or confusing. So Jeff Neal by knockout or decision, and by split decision, I think is on the table. And if you're going Euros Medic, stick with what works. Plus 180, but get a little bit more from it. Medic by knockout. That's the co-main event. And now, folks, after I was going to try to get through this quickly, and of course, after taking 2 weeks off for sickness and for UFC hiatus, with 14 fights on the card, like an hour and a half later, we are to the main event of the evening.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
It is a middleweight main event between Sean Strickland and Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. At middleweight, Sean Strickland still ranked 3rd, Hernandez ranked 4th. You got Hamzat as the champion. Then you got Dricus and Nasruddin at number 1 and 2. Brendan Allen, Israel Adesanya, Chao Barallo, RDR, Robert Whitaker, and Jared Cannonier actually round out the top 10. They should just wait till a certain point and then just have a whole wave of fighters just retire and just let me see what the refreshed rankings would look like. I swear to God, is Colby Covington still a ranked welterweight? It wouldn't shock me, as ridiculous as it is. Anyway, Sean Strickland here is the plus 215 underdog. Anthony Hernandez, the minus 255 favorite. Talk about Sean Strickland first. Born in 1991, has a 76-inch reach, 6 feet 1 inches tall. He's actually an inch taller and has an inch of reach advantage on Anthony Hernandez. And the thing about Sean Strickland is, a UFC tenure of runs. He got knocked out by Poatan, lost that barn burner split decision to Jared Cannonier, December 2022, then rattles off the 3 straight, beats Nasruddin by unanimous decision, beats Abus Magomedov by 2nd round knockout, as Abus Magomedov was almost too exhausted after some hard shots in the 1st round to even stand up. And then the crazy upset against Israel Adesanya that he won. He landed some hard shots, but 137 strikes, a lot of 1-2s, a lot of teams. Sean Strickland does not overcomplicate things. Now, he's lost 2 fights since December of 2022. Both were to Dricus du Plessis. The first du Plessis fight was a split decision loss. Du Plessis landed some, fewer strikes, but he got the 6 takedowns. There was a much better picture of Sean Strickland in that fight with DDP. The first one. A lot of people thought he won that fight. I did not, but there's certainly an argument you can make. Then he beats Paulo Costa by split decision, UFC 302, June of 2024. Fights 1 time in 2025, and in the first 2 months. So this is going to be his first fight in over a year. And that was his rematch with Dricus du Plessis that he lost by unanimous decision. He landed 128 strikes to Dricus's 147. Dricus landed one takedown at 5 seconds of control time, but it was 50-45 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards, 49-46 on the other. It was not a very entertaining fight, but it was one that DDP looked a lot better in, and Sean Strickland looked lost. Now, again, like, it's the only dude that's beaten him in like 3.5 years, 3.25 years. Only guys that have beaten him since May of 2018, when he was a welterweight, are Poatan, Cannonier, Duplessis. So only 3 dudes, and 2 of those losses were by split decision. It is historically, so Duplessis had 2 minutes of control time on 6 takedowns of 11 attempts in their first fight. It is historically really hard to grapple offensively against Sean Strickland. Sean is a good grappler. It's just not what we think about over the last few years. Now, Anthony Hernandez, 15-2 as a professional. Lost 2 of his first 3 UFC fights. February 2019 against Marcus Perez, in May of 2020 against Kevin Holland at middleweight. But he has now won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights in a row from February 2021 to August of 2025. Submits Rodolfo Vieira. Beats Josh Friend by unanimous decision with 8 takedowns. Gets 8 takedowns in MAB and gets a 3rd round arm triangle. Gets 6 takedowns on Edmund Shabazian, finishes him by 3rd round TKO. Against Roman Kopylov, 2nd round rear naked choke, 3 takedowns. The striking was pretty even in that fight up to that point. Finishes Michel Pereira in a very lopsided fight. In the 5th round, October 2024, 152 strikes to 24, 10 takedowns to nothing. I think I said earlier he had like 15.5 minutes of control time in that fight. Beats Brendan Allen by unanimous decision February of last year. So already a more recent fight than Strickland. That was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. And by the way, Brendan Allen, a guy that has won 2 in a row against Marvin Vettori and RDR. Only 2 guys that have beaten that dude since December 2021 when he got upset by Chris Curtis are Nasruddin Imavov and Fluffy Hernandez. Now he's coming off a 4th round rear naked choke, mauling again in a fight night main event where he is really shining. He's really shining fight night main events. Gets the 4th round rear naked choke against Roman Dolidze. Outstrikes him 91-36 with 9 takedowns. So the way to not lose to the way to beat Anthony Hernandez is to not have to go to the ground, and to finish him like early before he gets a chance. Marcus Perez got an anaconda choke, but there's a lot of people here: Kopylov, Pereira, Allen, Dolidze, Edmund, MAB, that he was able to take down a ton of times. And he has a lot of submissions for a good reason, but also he's vicious with his ground and pound when he starts letting it go. He really wears on people. Sean Strickland wears on people too, in a different way. I don't want to completely rule out Sean Strickland here, especially as such a heavy underdog, considering that he's not that much older. He does have the longer reach. His level of competition has been higher. He was the middleweight champion. His only loss, in the last 3.25 years has been to the same dude. One of those was a split decision. This could end up being like, maybe Fluffy has a hard time getting Sean Strickland down to the ground. It's hard to envision. Like, Fluffy has looked he's looked like the guy that could maybe challenge Hamzat Chimaev right now over his last few fights, now that his competition has stepped up. I think here, like, if DDP was able to get Sean Strickland down for like 6 takedowns, even with no control time, like over the course of their 5-round fight, able to get him down once in the last fight, that was 5 seconds. And then what was the 6 takedowns were? 2 minutes. If DDP was able to do it with his just freakish strength, like no concern for technique kind of thing, Anthony Hernandez should be able to get Sean Strickland down at least you know, 4 times in this fight, but in much more meaningful ways, where he starts working towards a finish, working towards a submission, landing good shots from the top. I think that like that will be there for Anthony Hernandez. It, you know, I think if you're gonna say Sean Strickland wins that, I think plus 215 is fine on the money line for a guy with the recent resume of Sean Strickland. You wonder, like, just being on podcasts and putting sound bites out and being on social media talking about world issues, does that affect you as a fighter? I think that we have good evidence to say that it does, in not the best ways. Once you start mostly like being known for as a personality, doing a lot of podcasts, it just seems a lot harder to maintain that elite level of competition that you had at one point. If Sean Strickland wins this fight, I think you have to say it's by decision, avoiding the ground as much as possible and doing what he does on the feet, maybe landing some, a few bigger shots, but landing the 1-2s, landing the teeps, being a puzzle that is hard for Anthony Hernandez to solve. And, like Sean Strickland by split decision, that's plus 1,200. Anthony Hernandez total significant strikes. Let's pick him over under 90.5. 90.5. He would have covered that twice in his career in fights that were supposed to go 5 rounds, but against lesser opponents. So maybe I would say like under 90.5, maybe like just a shred. He might land 90 strikes. Sean Strickland total strikes like over 80.5. Yeah, minus 115. Absolutely. It doesn't have to, it could be 81 jabs for Sean Strickland, but I think he can definitely get to that number. Hernandez, this is the interesting one. Under 5.5 takedowns, plus 110. I think that's actually the move for Hernandez. Because, if he is evolving, taking steps up in his game, I don't think he would need to take down Sean Strickland 7 times, 6 times to win this fight. I think that like there's a good chance that Sean Strickland makes it difficult, but Hernandez is still able to get his 4 or 5 control from the top and either win by decision or end up working towards a finish some way, somehow. So like Sean Strickland over 80.5 strikes, minus 115. I like that. Hernandez under 5.5 takedowns, plus 110 is actually where I would go with that. Sean Strickland total takedowns under 0.5 is minus 210. That's funny. Those are the props. So like if you're going Strickland, I think you have to say by like decision or even by like split decision. The last time he got a knockout was against Abus Magomedov. That was mostly the product of exhaustion. You'd then have to go back almost like 5.5 years to find a knockout against Brendan Allen. Every other win in the meantime, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all by decision, and a bunch of the losses were by decision too. He's been very tough to finish. The only guy that has knocked him out or like finished him at all was Alex Pereira since Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. So if you're going Hernandez, I would say by decision plus 140. By submission is certainly on the table, plus 265. I think like method of victory double chance by decision or by submission would probably end up being a pretty reasonable number. I think that's where you go with Fluffy. And like Sean Strickland's going to be enticing at that number. All the momentum is on Anthony Hernandez's side. He's a puzzle in his own way. Sean Strickland is a puzzle in his own way. I think you can have some fun with those props, but like Hernandez by decision or submission, or go with that method of victory double chance. That's where my confidence really lies here. Hit it. If you're taking a flyer, you're skeptical of Fluffy, you love Sean Strickland, it's by decision plus 350, by split decision plus 1,200. Obviously, moneyline plus 215 is not bad either. Folks,
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
that is finally all 14 fights of UFC Fight Night Houston. And now, because I haven't gotten a chance to do this during the week this week, and my DFS values picks article will be coming out tomorrow on RotoBaller. Now, I'm going to put together a couple of DFS lineups. I share. There we go. Give me, I'm sharing a screen. So here we go. I'm going to enter the, let's see. God, sorry this is taking so long, but what did I expect under the circumstances? 10-cent contest, UFC dime time. Now, who do I really want? I don't really want Carly Judas, or I really don't want any of these top four for these prices, but we'll see how I feel as we go on. So we'll start with Fluffy at 9,100. Then I'm going to go Josiah Harrell, 6,900. Then I'll go Zachary Reese, 7.7K of 8,766 remaining. And then let's actually go Alibi. I'm going to go Deliha actually at 8,600. I'll go Alden Korea at 9,000, and then I have 8,700 left. That'll make Jeff Neal. I could already see me coming up with a few more variations of this. There are more possibilities than I kind of thought. So that's the first lineup. Back to the lobby. Same contest. Create new lineup. And for variation's sake, we'll go the other guy in the main event. Start off with Sean Strickland at 7,100. Now I can afford to move kind of near the top here. I'll go Korea again at 9,000. Like I could see, like I don't see Jocelyn being worth 9,200. Like, yeah, over her last three fights, she has been like a very high scorer. It's the matchup I don't like. So, and Jacoby, I've made it clear how I feel about that fight. DeValley, I mean, sure, like I think DeValley could very well be worth that. I think just plenty of other people could that don't cost 9,400. And Carly Judas against Juliana Miller. We're talking the first prelim women's flyweight matchup. And, Juliana Miller is at least coming off of a victory. It's a dangerous spot. It always is. I'm going to go Deliha 8,600. I'm going to go Alibi 8,400. I don't really care to go Carlos Leal at 8,200. He should have won that fight against Fakardinov. I'll go Carlos Leal at 8,200. I have 8,700 left, and I will go Jeff Neal. So that's two lineups. And in summary, come on, man. All right, first lineup: Anthony Hernandez, Ante DeLeha, Zach Reese, Alden Korea, Jeff Neal, and Josiah Harrell. $0 remaining. Second lineup: Sean Strickland, Olivia Adiras, Ante DeLeha, Carlos Leal, Alden Korea, and Jeff Neal. $0 remaining. Folks, that is it. Finally, my God, for episode 201 of the Tap That MMA podcast. Again, for picks on all things combat sports, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow me on Instagram at RotoBrady MMA. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. You can find it on Apple Podcasts now and on Amazon Music. Look up for my MMA DFS Values Picks article coming out on Friday through RotoBaller. Keep an eye out in March for my spring football gambling content for the UFL, also through RotoBaller. Come out to the RotoBaller MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk about what you're doing MMA, DFS-wise and betting-wise for UFC Fight Night Houston. Go back, check out my recent interlude episodes with Mackenzie Mack, Judo Stiller, Derek Campos, Chris Brennan, Tony Freakland, Josiah Harrell, and a bunch of prospects, and I got a bunch more on the calendar. Keep an eye out for those. I'm still playing around with streams, with trying to, do this in the best video podcast format possible. Looking to have some other MMA guests you might be familiar with from some other shows that I've been on to make some picks here within the next couple of weeks. Lots of exciting things happening for the Tap That MMA podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sure you tuned out about an hour ago. Fast forward to the end of the card. Listen to the picks on the most important main card fights. Have yourselves a great week. Enjoy UFC Fight Night Houston, and peace.